Welcome to the You're Not Crazy podcast, hosted by Jessica Knight, a certified life coach who specializes in healing from narcissistic and emotional abuse. This podcast is intended to help you identify manipulative and abusive behavior, set boundaries with yourself and others, and heal the relationship with yourself so you can learn to love in a healthy way. You can connect with Jessica and find additional resources, content, and coaching at emotionalabusecoach.com.
Hello, and as always, thank you for being here. Today, I have returning guest, Nat. You may know her as Always Mending on TikTok or Instagram, and we are going to dive into sexual coercion. I have included all of Nat's links in the show notes, so you should absolutely go look at the resources that she has if this resonates with you. But I'm really grateful that she does this work that is very hard, I think, for a lot of us to understand and figure out where we fit in and how we have been sort of shaped by society around some of these areas. And so let's just get right to it. As always, you can find me at Emotional Abuse Coach on Instagram, emotionalabusecoach.com, and you can email me at jessica@jessicaknightcoaching.com. Hi, Nat. Thank you for joining me.
Hi, it's nice to be here again.
I'm so happy that you're here. Our episode has really helped a lot of people. People comment on that to me directly all the time.
Oh, good.
Can you, before we dive into anything, just explain who you are and what you do?
My name is Nat, short for Natalie, and I've been on TikTok since 2020 when my husband moved out. And I was shy, mousy Christian wife, and I was just learning about boundaries, and I was discovering sexual coercion. And I've spent the last 4 years kind of working through and healing those traumas and dating again and going through a spiritual journey now.
All the fun stuff. Right?
Yeah.
I noticed, I follow you, so I know this, but are you currently banned from TikTok?
Yes, my primary account that I started with on TikTok was mending.me, and I was just finally banned for the last time in April. I have been banned a total of 8 times across all the platforms.
Yeah. And on Instagram, do you keep getting banned there too?
Just once. Instagram won't let you come back once you're banned. There's no coming back. So TikTok used to reevaluate your account, and they would let you come back if they didn't find any real serious violations. But now they've got a 3 strikes rule and you're done.
Oh, well, I saw on your Instagram that you are starting to put, or you did put your TikToks into a book. Basically the post can't be they can't be banned finally, which I loved.
Yes.
And I love the idea, and I love that you did it. But why do you think that why do they keep banning you?
You know, it changes over time. People change. And I think what happened initially, it was just this public outcry against what I was saying, because sex is a need. Sex is important. You can't be telling people that they're not allowed to have sex in marriage, And so it was just a lot of mostly men who they called it hate speech. They were reporting me for all kinds of things to do with hate speech against a protected group.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. A protected group of men. Yeah.
That was the best one. But they called it bullying and harassment. And it was kind of funny for a little while. But then recently it was more just TikTok itself has just cracked down on the words you can use. Yeah. And I've gotten a violation recently for saying to a man, "You are a man, but you are not men."
Ooh,
I was just trying to make a point that he doesn't represent all men, right?
Right.
And that comment got a violation.
Oh my gosh.
So TikTok has just gotten really, really wildly misogynistic, I think is what it is, where a lot of women are dealing with this. We can't say the word man or men. And they can say all kinds of vile things to us.
I know.
We report it. We get no violation found constantly. I've given up reporting anything because the last time I had something actually valid as a violation, it was actual porn, and it was 2 years ago.
Wow.
That's it.
Yeah, I have actually just because I mean I work a lot with one-on-one people, so I have stopped like posting on a lot like on TikTok just
Hmm.
because um like you do have to kind of pay attention to the comments and I just don't have like the time and space for it right
Yeah.
now. So I've like taken it off, but like when I was on it I would get like you were talking about abuse and you said men and men get abused too and I'm like why can't you just listen and then
Mhm.
put your experience in it? Instead of
Yeah.
now attacking me. A
Well,
woman.
those are
Yeah.
typically the men who are abusing.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I got them on my page, they would say, when I'm talking about a woman having the right to say no to sex, they would say, but that's withholding and that's abuse.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's where they're coming from.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure they're gonna love this episode, but it's not for them. And so I wanted to I just shared this with you right before we got on that like I mean, we did an episode and I felt like I went into it not like totally naive on the topic, but naive on the way in which it shows up in the world, in my world. And at the time I was in a relationship. I'm not in that relationship anymore. It really helped me think about a lot of things and like look at my past and how I felt like my first sexual experiences at all were all pretty coercive. And I was quite young. I think I was like 14, if not 13. Like, being called a prude and these other things and all these ways I was pressured and it probably implanted a lot of beliefs in my head. But as I got older and I started to realize like the whole connection, naturally between feeling safe and feeling
Mhm.
intimate in myself and being able to have sex. And I had pretty strong boundaries with myself around it. But this last year I herniated a disc in my back and I couldn't have sex. Even if I wanted to, I couldn't have sex with my partner. I was in a lot of pain and the disc was in my lower back. So it was like, don't even talk to me about its own. And my
Mm.
partner at the time, and I knew what was happening because I had been following you, is like, he kept trying to pressure me in different ways to have sex or like, maybe it will feel good. I listened to a podcast today and they said 90 minutes of sex a week is what keeps couples together. And I just would be like, you're a psycho. Like, I'm injured.
Mhm.
Let's start there. I am injured and you're finding all these ways to pressure me. And then it would be, if it wasn't the words, it was the way that he would like, oh, like rub my back. And I'm like, please don't touch me. I am in
Yeah.
pain. And I remember like for the podcast comment, he said that. And I was like, why are you saying that to me? Like,
Mm.
are you telling me that so that I feel guilty? I could barely walk right now. So are you telling me that so I feel bad that I'm not trying this? Like, how is that actually helpful right now? And if I don't agree with that podcast and like that way of thinking about it, then like, how can I talk to you about that? And
Mhm.
he got upset with me and shut me down and said, like, I'm taking away his need.
Mm.
And I just remember like sitting back and like, I think that night I like went back on your Instagram and I just was like, well, I know that this is his way and it's been going on for 2 months of like trying to pressure me into having sex when I physically can't. And so that I feel bad. So the minute I can, I'm jumping back into it in some way with him. But I had the awareness to just like really be like, no. But I felt so grossed out. Like the whole thing made me feel like, oh my God. Like I could just
Mhm.
imagine how this would be if I was healthy and not wanting to.
Yeah.
Like I have this excuse and that's what is helping me set this boundary. But like, would I be setting this boundary every day?
Yeah.
Probably. And I have a lot of clients that go through similar things, but it was really like, I think it was just like so interesting for me because then I started to realize how it showed up in different ways. And I know that the first time we did a podcast, I saw a lot of posts on touching and like unwanted touch. And it just like, it really changed the way I thought. And it helped so much. So I want to say that like one, it like helped so much for me to like feel really validated in my experience. But
Mm.
I'm sure that in what I just said probably carries a lot of nuance in the way people are affected by sexual coercion.
Mhm. Yeah. And not everyone is affected in the same way.
Yeah. And so I feel like it may be important just to break down the idea of that, even if your partner is saying, well, 90 minutes of sex a week is what keeps couples together. That is absolutely not something that people need to subscribe to.
Mm-hmm. Well, and even if it were true,
Yeah.
it's 90 minutes of consensual sex.
Right. Right. And so can you help, I guess, like the listeners understand I don't know, the controversy, I guess, around like
Yeah.
the need part when it comes to sex?
Yeah. So it's everything in society has kind of gotten flipped upside down from how our bodies are naturally designed to work. And so the whole arousal system is off by default, right?
Yeah.
When we're born, we are not sexually aroused by something when we're born. We're not in a constant state of arousal. Even men, even though people will say men always want sex, even men are not in a constant state of arousal. There is some sort of stimulus that gets them aroused. The same is true of women. So our default is no. And that's what I tell people all the time. Your default is no. No is the default. This makes men mad all the time. They think the default is yes. And if there's a no, then it's my job to convince you to say yes. But no, default is no. My default since I was a baby is no sex.
Yeah.
So as I get older and I come into myself and I'm learning about my body, I might start to be aroused by something. So, and we move in through relationships and we're aroused by our partner through the dating phase or through this early part of the relationship. And it's in those phases when we're feeling that arousal and we're feeling safe and connected to that person. That's all wonderful and valid. And that's when the best sex happens. But as relationships progress, there becomes this entitlement in some people that they expect that it will just happen without that arousal. They don't understand a lot of times that arousal is what caused you to want that sex in the beginning. And so they expect that it's just going to happen. Society has taught that sex is a part of a healthy relationship. So if you have a healthy relationship, you're going to have sex no matter what. And if you're not having sex, then there's a problem in your relationship, which technically could be true. But having that sex, forcing that sex to happen, isn't going to make your relationship healthier. And this is where a lot of people get it wrong. And when I talk about coercive men, it is mostly men. But when I talk about coercive men and women, it's people who, there's two types. There are people who just don't know, they don't understand, and they've been taught by society that sex just has to happen because I'm in a relationship. And then there are some people that are entitled to it and just feel entitled to it no matter what. And they feel like it's wrong for them to have to do anything to quote unquote earn it, which is not actually earning. It's actually just stoking desire in your partner.
Yeah. And there's this whole idea, I think, around that earning thing that it's like, you're entitled to their time, like their money, like all this stuff. And it's like, and which like drives me mad. And then it's like, well, that doesn't mean that you just then get sex whenever you want it. Like I'm not a blow up dog,
Well, when we're talking about money though, if we're talking about marriage, those men who are trying to hang on to that money need to shut the hell up. Excuse my language, but this is marriage. Legally, that money belongs to the wife as much as the husband.
Right.
All of the money in the relationship. So money's irrelevant. But sex is just a completely different thing, though. And for people who have a transactional relationship, if that's what they want, sex still has to be left out of it. You can say, I'll give you $100 to go shopping tomorrow if you do all the chores and don't make me do any dishes. That's fine. But I'm going to do the dishes and now you have to have sex with me. No.
Yeah.
It's not going to fly.
Yeah. And I feel like that's what I've seen. And this comes up with a lot of my clients, or they'll end up in couples therapy. And instead of talking about the lack of safety and trust, and I mean, even consent in this place in their relationship, or like what would lead to that, to like, if we use woman and man, like the woman feeling the want or the arousal or the intimacy around it, they're often focused on, we're not having enough sex. And the woman is focused on, I don't feel safe.
Yeah. Well, she doesn't even know that she doesn't feel safe most of the time.
Yeah. And so can you name some signs of not feeling safe? Like if you're, which might be
Yes.
hard. Yeah. Okay. Let's say that might be
Yeah,
hard to answer.
the biggest sign is flinching if he touches you,
Mm-hmm.
right? If the thought of, hey, we're going to have sex tonight makes you feel something strange,
Yeah.
you're not, if you're not immediately excited about the prospect of having sex tonight, there's a problem. Because somebody, unless you really genuinely have a physical problem, but in which case your partner should be loving and respectful. If you have anything close to fear or anxiety attached to the possibility of sex happening, that's a huge red flag.
Yeah.
Another one would be if he's sexting you, sending you dirty texts. If that's grossing you out, that's a red flag.
Yeah.
That's something to talk to him about. If you don't feel safe, if it doesn't feel, I don't even use the word safe as much anymore, so much, because a lot of women will push back on that and they'll say, no, I'm safe. He would never hurt me. So what I say is, do you feel like it's not going to be okay, or you're going to get a negative reaction if you speak up about those texts or about his touching you inappropriately? It's something my ex-husband would do, and following me up the stairs. I never wanted him to be behind me because he would grab at my butt.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel like it was okay to tell him, hey, could you please not grab at my butt? Because there would be pushback on that.
I was punished basically for saying, please don't grab up my butt. Actually, I got so frustrated because I had asked like 25 times. And then I was like, stop, please just fucking stop. And like, he was like, oh my God, I can't believe you just yelled at me in public. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe
and you're the bad guy.
Grab my ass for the 15th time.
Yeah.
Well, it was the other side, not the side that's hurt. I said no ass grabbing because I'm in pain. You asshole. Like, I'm just like,
yeah.
I mean, I even get mad now, even though it was like months, 9 months ago, if not more than that. But I was like, it's like, exactly what you said. It's like that unwanted touch. And I'm asking for it to be respected, and then they're not respecting it. And I hear that come up so much with my clients that are noticed, like they'll notice it, or even the words. And I'm glad you brought up like the texting or things like that, because I even had a client recently who said that she actually asked, she was like, is this considered, abuse? Like, he keeps texting me during my workday, like kind of like sexting me a bit. And I am uncomfortable because like, I'm not in that mindset, but I don't know how to respond to him.
This is why in tandem with sexual coercion, I talk a lot about objectification. Because that actually is where it all starts. It's long before she's even saying no to sex. He's objectifying her. It's ogling at her, leering at her, making sexual comments. Sometimes he's sneaking into the bathroom while she's taking a shower. There was a video of a guy on TikTok last year who would sneak in and steal his wife's towel while she's taking a shower. So she had to come out of the bathroom naked to find a towel. And then he would get to see her in all her naked glory.
Yeah.
And this was a fun game he played. And it's that kind of stuff constantly. Yeah. And so that's actually what's causing her to not want sex. But she doesn't feel justified in that because she's a wife. There's this whole idea that I'm a wife now. This is what husbands and wives do. And my friends love it, but they don't understand that their friends love it because their husband takes no for an answer.
Yeah. Yeah. And they don't feel the pressure around it, that if it doesn't happen, it's like they will be somehow punished either overtly or covertly for not, or just even like saying no.
The whole going up the stairs thing. I have a guy friend that we're real close and we talk about this kind of thing. And he was actually sexually coerced. And we talked about it today. He said his ex-partner, complained about him saying some comment as he was going up behind her, going up the stairs. But his immediate response was, oh shit, I'm sorry. That kind of guy you feel safe with. The guy who's like, what do you mean? God, that little bit of attitude is just like, oh, I don't feel like I can say something now. I just have to put up with this.
Yeah. And then I think it's also like the way that they act, even if they're like, oh, okay, whatever, something's going on with you today. It's like it always puts it on, puts it on the other person, that it's like they're it's them, not,
Mhm.
not,
Oh, yeah. My ex would yell at me for flinching.
oh,
Yeah, like it was something I was doing to him.
on purpose.
Yes, it was
Yeah.
embarrassing to him, it was rejecting him, and I needed to cut it out. And it was a bad example to the kids. I gotta add that.
Yeah. Well, that's actually a really good point too, because I was thinking about that. So I'm a single mom. I don't mind holding somebody's hand or things like that. But like if obviously my daughter knows we're in a relationship, which has been super rare, but I don't really want to be kissed or held or correct or
Mm,
anything. And I think about that a lot. Like I think, and part of it maybe just be preference of how you want to show affection to around your kids.
mhm,
But I feel like it's part of the whole like coercive control of somebody's basically trying to tell you this is how you need to act in order to show love,
mhm.
which
Yeah,
where like that's not true. Like that again, it's not consenting. It's not we both have decided this is what we're comfortable with. It's you're going to keep making me feel uncomfortable and then I'm going to have
yeah,
to tell you that you're making me uncomfortable over and over
yeah. Well, and legitimately, if somebody is actually uncomfortable with a particular show of love, then that's something to talk about in that relationship. And in a healthy relationship, one person can say, "Oh, well, I don't want to make you feel uncomfortable, so I'm
again.
not going to do that to you." But then you might also get somebody who would say, "But this is actually really important to me, and maybe we need to cut ties and find people that are a little bit more connected with us in the ways that make us feel comfortable."
Yeah. And I think that when I like sort of reconcile some of that in my head, it relates to the whole idea of entitlement.
Mhm.
But that like, okay, because you're my wife or my husband, you're now entitled to, you feel entitled
Yeah.
to my body. And I'm sure I know what you think about that. But I wanted,
Mhm.
but I wanted to have you hear what you have to say about that because I'm like having trouble even saying it because I'm disturbed by saying it. Like about like,
Oh,
that,
yeah.
because I mean, but that's somebody basically like saying like your body's not yours and I just get to like
Yeah.
what I want to do with it because now it's mine. And that just makes me feel like really sick on the inside. Um, but
I
what,
don't blame you. I
yeah,
don't blame you. That your body belongs to you and no one else.
yeah.
And the moment your mind picks up on that entitlement, you don't feel safe anymore. And you might not even know why.
Mhm.
I got a quote that I posted on Instagram. I just found it. The nervous system doesn't care that it's your husband, only that you're not
Mm,
allowed to tell him to stop.
I love that. Yeah. Yeah.
So our bodies, independent of our minds, will pick up on something that's not safe. And our body will say no long before our mind does. And that's
Mhm.
the flinching. That's the butterflies in your stomach or the other things that are happening in your body. This is why a good part of what I talk about is helping women understand their body and what's happening and to listen to those responses.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you find that a lot of women will like either second guess or downplay their natural body responses?
Oh, yeah, and I didn't even understand what any of it meant when I started all of this. I didn't understand the nervous system at all.
Yeah.
It was a year into my TikTok journey, I started to figure this stuff out, and I actually worked with a somatic therapist
Mhm.
who specifically deals with touch and working with the nervous system and she helped me receive touch again. It was a very interesting experience, but even just touching her hand was a trigger for me.
Yeah.
Uh, our nervous system is the thing that alerts us to danger. That's that part of our body that picks up on things long before our mind does. And so even when our mind can't make sense of it, our mind is saying, but he's my husband, but he should be safe. He's never done anything to hurt me. Our body is saying, no, 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 no.
Yeah. But I can't tell this person no. And that's why I don't
Yeah.
say. Or if I do say
Yeah.
no, then I'm going to be guilted, or made to be, feel bad or something as a result of saying no.
Hmm. Yeah.
How
And
have
that's
you?
what makes it unsafe.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I guess like I want to talk a little bit about the guilt trips that I mean, because that's something that I think people can look out for if they are feeling guilted by things that people might say to them or their husband might say to them.
Yeah.
That, and like, so I was thinking about this earlier and how it came up to me for me. And like, I made a list of a few of them. And one of them is, well, my love language is physical touch. And my response to that was like, you could say that about all the love languages, honestly. Like you go through them all the time.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I like touch too, but safe touch. The other one that I wrote down of things, it's been 2 months.
Yeah.
I've been injured and I don't want to.
I actually have a list on my website. I have a website, maritalcoercion.com. And I have a list of all kinds of things that they say. It's also in my playbook.
Okay.
I wrote the men's playbook.
Yeah. Well, I will of course link those. Can you share a few more of what people
So
say?
the love languages one is huge. And I've been thinking about kind of plotting out some responses to these things too.
Yeah.
Most of the responses would just be, yep, that's how it is. So, my ex would say, another period. And
oh my God.
My response today that I didn't have the guts to say back then would be, yep, another one. It's been another month.
I know. Crazy how that happened.
Yeah. So the love languages one is fun though, because when men say that, I actually have a character that I play who's sort of a snooty, snotty socialite. She's the sprinkle, sprinkle girl. And she'll say, oh my God, my love language is gifts. And I can't believe you have not bought me another gift.
Oh, I love that.
Or like, I want a new car and you just told me no. Do you understand the rejection I'm feeling because you won't buy me a new car?
Yeah. Yeah. I did it a little bit with acts of service without even realizing it. But I was like, oh, well, like if you had gotten the quarters that I asked you to get, like, I don't know, 6 weeks ago, that to replace the quarters that you took from me from the laundry, then maybe like my love language would be met too. Like I just remember being like, because I was annoyed. So I was like, I didn't even, but I love what you just said. I didn't even realize like, because again, it's like, oh, where you're right. Your needs are far more important than mine.
Yeah. Well, the thing is with needs, we can talk about needs are kind of in a hierarchy.
Yeah.
Everybody has so-called needs, but how many of our needs are really supposed to be met by ourselves, right? Versus expecting other people to meet those needs. Yeah. And which of those needs is actually important versus some of the others that are not as important. So food, water, air, those are all life-threatening needs. Right. We have to have those. And we're generally responsible for meeting those needs ourselves. Yep. We can ask for help, but no one is responsible for meeting those needs. Now, within marriage, it's a little different because obviously you can't have a man kicking his wife out on the street. She still needs shelter, and it's his legal responsibility to provide her shelter while they're married, theoretically, right? So, but the hierarchy, as far as I see it, our bodily autonomy, our bodily consent, particularly sexually, comes before everything else. That is up there with food, water, and air. Yeah. If it's your feelings of rejection, that is valid and it's still important, but it's not important enough to trump my need for consent. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, another thing they say is we might as well be roommates, right? Oh my gosh. Yeah. And I say to the men, if you were a better roommate, she'd probably be turned on by you.
Yeah. One I heard recently was my partner says, I'm just withholding sex.
Yep. Like withholding is a very direct messaging that says it's not okay for you to say no. Yeah. You're wrong to say no. And that is the very definition of coercion. Really. It's anything someone says or does to make another person feel wrong for not having sex or to convince them or pressure them to have sex. So it could be thousands of things that somebody can say and do. And a lot of times it's a dog whistle. It's something that's unique to that couple that no one else would ever pick up on.
Yeah. And I think it also goes right into like, I mean, this is like very similar to the sexting we were touching on before of like this like unwanted sexual advances or like their hand on you, or like, oh, you look so beautiful. It would just be so nice if we could just like I had a client, so she read this to me. She was like, I literally on the phone with you, I just got this message. I wish we could just have a slow fuck today. She's like, I can't even look at him. And these are the messages I'm getting. And now if I don't respond back, then I'm gearing up for a fight. And like, then we talked about like how to set a boundary around that. But like those kinds of like unwanted messages, and then it's like, oh, you're just not receiving like my care or my love, or I'm just attracted to you.
Yeah. Is it wrong that I'm attracted to my wife? They say that all the time.
Yeah.
I say, no, it's not the attraction that's wrong. It's the behavior that's wrong. So it's not the feelings that are bad. It's the behavior that's wrong. It's the behavior that's harmful.
Yeah. And then as a result, the behavior, I think, that's what's causing the flinching, right? And the internal angst of like, no, oh, I'm uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But a lot of people, like you said, they can't say that, or if they stumble on your page, I often think that if someone's going to sit there and argue with us, especially like a woman that could possibly be experiencing this, they're probably feeling really uncomfortable in their relationship, but they're not verbalizing it.
Or it just seems so normal because women talk to each other.
Yeah.
And, something that I have a list here, kind of there's stuff sprinkled in here from the women too. And they'll say things like, well, but you're abusing him if you don't do it. They'll say, just get another glass of wine. Or the church women would say, oh, honey, nobody likes sex. We just do it. You just got to get it over with for his sake. Yeah. So it's that kind of messaging that you've got that coming in one ear and the husband in the other ear. So we have to shift the conversation from sex not happening to kind of what's happening in the relationship that's making somebody not interested in sex. It's actually a lot more, it seems like to me, it's more obvious when it's a man because everybody expects a man to want sex, right?
You're right.
So if he doesn't want sex, like with women, we can say there are men who will be just like, well, women just don't like sex. That's just a thing, which is wrong. But
yeah,
they get it in their heads that women have sex for them and that it's normal for them to not want it. But with men, when a man is turned off to his female partner, then it's more like, oh, what's going on in that relationship, right? It is more her fault in that relationship. If there is fault, I don't say fault really, the guy's fault. But I have heard of men who have had abusive women as partners. And it's that through that dynamic with her that they don't feel safe to do things sexual, but they don't understand it. Again, they're in the same boat. They don't understand why they're turned off. And so they're just like, I don't know what to do because I know I'm going to get in trouble if I don't do it. So I'll just go ahead and do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Like she's going to feel like I don't care if I don't do this rather than having.
And I get women in my comments too that will say their husband is withholding.
Yeah. And why are they then? Oh, that sounds like a great conversation for that relationship to have rather than, just the idea of it's just like they're withholding. It's like, no, they're not consenting.
Yeah. And so what is it? And so if the default is no, if withholding assumes the default is yes.
Yeah.
And you're saying no as a punishment to withhold sex. But if the default is we're not having sex until there's some reason to, well, then what is the reason?
Yeah.
And why is that not happening?
Yeah. And then this is where I think a lot of men would start. I mean, I'm probably women too, but like, I think
it is mostly men.
Mostly men. Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes I just freaking hate the whole but what it's like, okay, I know I 100% get that it is both, but in this situation,
I know. And I only bring it up just for a little bit of balance, but also just because it does present differently for men. And sometimes it can help people see things differently to see it the other way, that it is more about the behavior than the gender.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just reminding me about like the victim mentality that men would fall into, whether it is with others, like, oh, this is what's, oh, she won't have sex with me. And, it makes them feel justified to go and like have an affair because now they're the victim, the poor victim that hasn't had
Mm-hmm.
sex and they're staying in this marriage, this sexless marriage. How dare they? And it really, I mean, it creates an entire other element of when I talk to people about this, it's like there's a lot of like emotionally abusive behaviors, and obviously this falls right underneath it. But sometimes I feel like it's like a whole other like bracket to address of what's going on, because you have to like repattern a lot of stuff, to just even see them as like they're not a victim.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's what positioned me to have this conversation in the beginning, was because my ex-husband was not actually particularly abusive in any other area.
Yeah.
There were some ways that it trickled out to other parts of our marriage, but it was 99% of it was centered around sex. And so there's a whole different scenario that I had that a lot of women didn't. Most women have some other kind of abuse happening regularly, and they're not even able to see the sexual part because it's so bad everywhere
Yeah.
else. And so once you can tie in the sex to that, it's like, oh, we did have sex problems. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now it all makes sense and it all comes full circle.
Yeah. When you talking to somebody and say this is like somebody new in the comments and they're reaching out because they're actually putting together a lot of the pieces, but they're like super confused, right? They're trying to put together these things. Where do you feel like you notice people get the most stuck in? Like they're like, okay, like definitely I'm having this light bulb moment, but I'm having trouble connecting it.
It's probably in the needs department,
Yeah.
love languages they get stuck on. And also I gotta say most of it is Christianity,
Mm.
because most of the obligation, the sexual obligation, comes through the church. And you don't see that quite so much outside the church. It's more of a societal, yeah, he needs sex. And so once you can get past the part where I can say, okay, even if he thinks he needs sex, don't you also need to feel safe?
Mm-hmm.
Now, we can have that conversation. But with the women, Christian women in particular, it's a whole different experience talking to them. I have gotten into some long fights with Christian women. I'm trying to think back. There was one right before my account got banned on Instagram. There was a woman who I got into it with, who it was all about, for her, it was all about his confidence, boosting his confidence. It's this caretaker mentality that as the wife, it's my responsibility to be all of this for my husband. And part of that involves being basically a prostitute for his sake.
Mm-hmm.
And being his sexual servant, really. And it just so happened I was in a conversation with a man at the same time. They weren't connected to each other, but I have a post on my Substack where I kind of went through those comments with them and that whole conversation. And hers was most disturbing. His was expected, but it's different when it's a woman.
Yeah. Yeah. And
So she was very sweet and trying to come across as she was trying to be sympathetic, like, oh, I'm so sorry that happened to you, but you still have a duty to your husband,
Yeah.
One of the things she said was from the Bible, where the Bible says to keep no record of wrongs, which is code for women to say if your husband has wronged you, then you're retaliating against him if you don't have sex with him.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and again, like the no record. So like, no matter how many times you feel wronged, right?
Yep.
You put that in.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so you're using sex as a weapon to punish him if you're keeping record of any time he's wronged you. It's just incredibly toxic.
Yeah. I wasn't raised with religion, and our other podcast, the first one, does touch on a lot of the religious dynamics, because that's where like it was more of a let's talk about this topic like holistically. And I feel like I've never been religious, but I definitely have like moved further and further away from it. But I recently, as most people did, got like obsessed with this like Mormon show on Hulu. And
Yeah.
they talk about it quite a bit, about like how like sex is, it's everything is about like serving your husband. And I know, I mean, I obviously know it's in a lot of religions, but it is so interesting for me to be like kind of really outside of this. I grew up in New York and I live in Boston now. Like I've never really been around very strong religious groups that the society is like ingrained in that. And so it's like even stronger, like I can walk down the street and see 5 different people from 5 different religions, and they may all have part of, like, I mean, they may all have different views in some way, but I think the idea of like that it's kind of like grounded in this idea of like serving a man just really like it grosses me out. But I know
or just that men can't handle their own emotions, and it's a woman's job to play therapist and help him regulate his nervous system.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
and like, that's a really good point, actually, because that is something that like I've experienced. And I remember feeling like it doesn't matter if I am tired, if I'm exhausted, if I had like the worst day, if I'm injured, if I don't know, if my dog died today, this person would want me to be, there's one way I can show up, and I'm not willing to do that.
Yeah.
But it's like, that's where I think the emotional coercion part comes into all this too, of like this constant guilting you to put all your needs and ideas and feelings aside.
Yeah.
To show up, which is, like you said, it's like the basis of, sex. It's like sex just gets looped into that.
Well, and it's painted as this heroic thing that women do for men too. I'll get people that will say, this is the one thing you can do for your husband to make him feel wanted and loved. And you can't just do this one thing, right? They make it seem like this small thing, but it's no small thing. If a man hasn't been treating me well, to take off my clothes and get vulnerable and let him have his way with me is not anything heroic. It's terrible and traumatic for me.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm going to guess that it's one of the hardest things for people to really like unpattern in themselves, especially if they have such a deep patterning of this is how I'm supposed to be.
Yeah.
To start to untangle that.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot of work. And I've spent the last 4 years doing it.
Yeah.
One of the things that has helped me a lot that I bring up to people now is going back to the roommate comment. I try to separate now the household from the relationship. So imagine you don't live together. You don't do dishes together. You don't do laundry together. You're not sharing a lifestyle within the same house with this person anymore. What is your relationship? And a lot of people find that they don't actually have anything. They have no relationship. It's all chores and household and kids and school and work. But outside of all of that, there really is no relationship.
What if somebody was to say, well, sex is how we keep our relationship?
What relationship?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? I mean, if your sex is if your relationship is failing because there's no sex, what relationship do you have?
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. I think that would like really, I can definitely see how that would.
So I asked them, especially the men, I asked them to tell me, what do you love about your wife that is not serving you in some way? And they have a real tough time answering it.
It's a great question. And the first time I was in an abusive relationship, I had a friend ask me that, like, and he would ask me that over and over again of like, no, wait, what do you like about this person? And I really struggled. And he was like, well, you just told me things that you do with them. So like, you can golf with somebody else. You can do this with somebody else. Like you and I can go watch football and we laugh together. Like, so we got that, like, what is it? And that, I mean, it's such a question that like stops you in your tracks to be like, wait, what is the answer to that?
Yeah. Yeah. What do I like about this person?
Yeah. 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 And like, if the only answer that I have is like, we have good sex.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can also have good sex with other people.
Exactly. I know.
Well, I get people who are trying to use sex to save their relationship.
Yeah.
So it's like a last stop, last resort, life raft kind of situation. Like, I recognize that our relationship is terrible, but I'm going to try to use sex to fix it. And this is a lot of men because as I've been learning, the men who say they need sex actually do in a way, but only because they're so stunted emotionally. So there are men, a lot of men, who genuinely don't feel their emotions. They don't feel love and connection with a woman until they're having sex with her. And it's that sexual connection, that sexual release, that all of their emotions come to the surface. And now all of a sudden they're in love with her again, despite having treated her badly because they were pissed off and angry all week. So it's still terrible. It's still abuse. But these men actually do technically need that sex. It's just really toxic because they need to get help so that they can actually have a real, genuine, intimate experience with this woman that's not sexual. A lot of these men just can't. They don't know how to do it. They don't have any examples of anything, any sort of non-sexual affection.
I mean, there's obviously a lot. There's like psychology in there, emotional immaturity, probably personality disorders. But when you think about that, like the men that like put all their validation or their, their release, quote unquote, on sex, which is then putting it on their partner. What do you think, like, what is the reframe there for them? So if there's a woman listening to this and she's like, okay, if that's the way that they see it, what is actually a healthy way to view this so that they can take whatever their partner's saying to them, and even if it's only in their own head, to be like, okay, that's actually not healthy. He can say that all he wants, but like, this is a him issue. What is that reframe?
Well, I think of it like an alcoholic. So somebody who's addicted to alcohol, imagine if they were telling people that I need a whiskey. I need whiskey. Well, can you have water? No, I need whiskey. And you're like, but whiskey isn't healthy for you. Maybe you should drink water. You could drink juice or even soda or anything else would still be healthier than just having whiskey all the time. Right? So it's about variety. It's about a healthy balance of lots of different liquids. But, some liquids are going to be healthier than others. And not to say that sex isn't healthy, but sex by itself with no other intimacy is soul destroying. And these men don't understand what's happening to them, but they are losing themselves to this idea that they have to have sex in order to feel validated. And it's destroying them as almost as much as their wife, except that their wife is experiencing a sexual assault, whereas they are just feeling invalidated and rejected all the time. That still sucks. That's still bad. Not quite as bad as a sexual assault, but they need to get help for that so they can feel validated in other ways. So that when sex is off the table, they're not going to spiral and land in a depression or start abusing their wife.
Yeah, and not grow more entitled to something that their wife is saying, no, this isn't healthy. This relationship to this is not healthy, and we can find what's healthy, but it's not going to be just me having sex.
Yeah. And so it's like asking, hey, can we have a glass of water together? Or, and he says, no, it's got to be whiskey.
Right.
So like,
that's a really good way to think about it. Yeah. Yeah.
You're going to make yourself sick if you're just drinking whiskey all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. And also like, there's probably like some patterning for like a woman to almost like be able to say to themselves of like, okay, if I can see that every time he's asking me for this is him asking for like whiskey or drugs or something. And I'm saying, I can't do that because right now I want water. And you're telling me the only thing, the way that I can connect with you is to have whiskey.
Yeah.
Then you're like, I'm not consenting to that. So like, I mean, I think that's like really, it's like a light bulb moment for me in a way that I can, that I probably will think about at this point on of like, there has to be more ways and more healthy conversations than this one thing is the thing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a
and the healthy conversation should be centered around connection. How are we connecting? And if sex is the only way we're connecting, that's not a healthy connection. So there's got to be other connection outside of that. I have a lot of analogies. Another one I use is pie. So assuming your favorite food is pie and your partner wants to make you pie because they know how much you love it, that's a really sweet thing in a relationship, right? But imagine you have a partner that maybe you don't feel like pie today and your partner gets mad at you because I made you this pie just for you. Don't you love it? Well, after a while of this attitude surrounding pie, you won't really like pie anymore. You'll start to get sick of it, right? And then now you're asexual because your husband has completely turned you off to pie and sex. Another analogy I use is bowling. You know, you can look at it in terms of bowling. This is a fun activity that we do together. I love to go bowling with you. But if you're mad at me when I don't feel like it, then I'm not going to want to go bowling with you anymore because you've made it not fun anymore.
Right. And if every time you're saying, let's do this, right, and it ends up in this, like this way, or I can't say, you know what, I'm not really in the mood for bowling today.
Mm-hmm.
Bowling's no longer safe.
Yeah. Yeah. And after a while of that, if I'm consistently not allowed to disengage from bowling when I don't feel like it, then I'm never going to want to do it. Not with you anyway. I might find a new bowling partner.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I have to say this just because I'm sure men do this. That's like, well, that's why I had an affair, is because you didn't want to do it anymore, which, and it even like made me a little sick to even say it, but like, I know that is said. I mean, I've had.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I flip that around on them and I say, well, what did you do to make her not want it? And is that fair to take away your wife's sexuality by making her not want sex? Because women love sex too. And if you've done something to make me hate it, then you've taken that from me.
Yeah. I think like, what brings this all together for me is the idea of, if this was a healthy relationship, I would be able to talk to my partner about this. If we're not experiencing this, but I wanted to talk to them about like this idea and how it's important to me and how to like make our relationship safer, then a healthy partner would be totally open to that.
Yeah. Yeah. And a healthy partner isn't going to consistently have a problem with you when you're not in the mood. So you're really not, if you had a healthy partner, you're really not going to get to that point in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. Every time, like, I mean, I've gone on some deep dives of your content, but I've also, like even the last podcast, like when we think about this, it really does bring out probably how much patterning we have of just accepting a lot of this. And I mean, obviously how hard it is to reframe it, but just to consistently like almost have those conversations with ourselves of, is this what I want? Like, does this feel healthy? Can I say no? Do I have agency around this? Does it feel like if I say no, I get punished every time? For me, it's like, well, the safety that would be around if we could have these conversations with our partners, that actually shows us that like they do respect us, want us to feel safe. And it's like the standard of what, everything I think about it always goes back to my daughter, of like how I would want my daughter to feel in all these moments. Never want her to feel pressured, never want her to feel like she doesn't have, that agency, and that she can't say, are you crazy? No.
Well, I talk about it with my kids in non-sexual terms too. Just, if a kid at school wants to borrow your pencil and you say no, how are they going to react to you? And how would that make you feel? Depending on, are they going to say, oh, okay, no problem? Or are they saying, why not?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And how does that make you feel? And do you feel like you can stand up to them and say, it's my pencil, you can't have it?
Yeah.
As in, it's my body, you can't have it.
Yeah. Yeah. Are there any books or resources that you recommend on this topic?
Yeah. The first one, as a Christian, the one that helped me out was, I always forget the title of it. I know what it looks like. I'm looking it up on my website.
Let's name your website quickly. It's
okay.
It's alwaysmending.com,
yes,
right? Okay.
Always Mending. I have a link on there under category Learn. I have recommended books. And so, The Great Sex Rescue by Sheila Gregoire is written for Christian women about obligation sex. And she's done a lot of studies on how obligation sex actually drives libido down.
Okay.
And causes all kinds of sexual problems. Another good one is Come As You Are by Emily Nagoski. That one's really, really popular as far as just getting to know your body and understanding your sexuality.
I actually have that one, and it's on my bookshelf, and I never opened it. And I wonder if it's like, it's my internal block around like leaning into my own sexuality, which when you talked earlier about, it took so long to feel like anybody could touch you, even like in a safe way. It's me think of that of like, if I really explore this, there probably is stuff in there for me to work through around like the safety of it.
Yeah. And it's a lot of just, for me, it was helpful in just understanding that my body isn't going to be turned on sometimes. And that's okay. I was under the impression as a Christian wife that none of that mattered and I still had to do it. And so that book helped me understand that no, that's just not how my body's designed. I'm not supposed to do that.
Has your ex-husband, ever acknowledged that he was sexually coercive?
No, he has no idea what I'm doing on TikTok. And I remember initially trying to say something to him, and it was more just like, well, I felt like it wasn't okay for me to say no. And I felt like I just had to do it, and it didn't feel right. And it kind of felt like rape. I had that kind of conversation toward the end of our marriage, and he blew up and was like, well, how do you think that makes me feel?
So yeah, now you're blaming me.
Yeah. And so I never felt like I could ever tell him.
It's amazing that you're able to have this platform and to still have the safety around that. Like, he doesn't know, or like he has no idea.
Yeah. I've gone to a lot of trouble to stay anonymous. I don't use my real name, and I block anybody that finds me that might know him.
Yeah.
And luckily, we didn't run in the same circles. We had separate friend groups. And so all of his friends and family are blocked, and it's just we're all separate. So it's okay. And I just keep it that way, mainly for the kids.
Yeah.
They're adults and they're out on their own in a couple of years. That maybe it'll be a different story. That's why I'm working on the other book.
Yeah. Yeah.
That could take me a year to put that together. It's called 1,000 Days on TikTok.
Yeah, I saw it, and it's like, I love the format because it's super simple. It's just like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I've gotten through, I'm going through all of my videos from November and December 2020 up to, 1,000 days. So, which lands about the middle of last year. And I'm just kind of going through in a journal format to talk about everything that I was experiencing throughout my journey on TikTok.
That's amazing. And thank you for doing that and putting it in a place where it can't be banned.
It can't be banned.
Yeah.
No. You can get a print copy, and my goal with it too is to make it more autobiographical and less specifically about coercion.
Yeah.
So, it's just a woman could safely have it in her home, theoretically, and a husband wouldn't get mad.
Yeah. Well, they'll get mad.
Well, maybe, but if he knows me, if he knows me, he should keep his mouth shut.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I also want to make sure women know that they can heal.
Yeah.
Post-divorce, when I'm free of it, I went through a lot of therapy and got to healing. I ended up having another relationship, and a lot of almost everything that my husband put me through has been mostly healed now. And I have enjoyed good sex again. And so that's important for women to have that hope.
Yeah. And I do appreciate that you talk about that and that relationship on your Substack and on your Instagram about the relationship that came after and all the learning that you had. I feel like it can be so difficult, after
and new things are triggered all the time.
Yeah.
I had one just this morning, and I posted a video this morning where some old thing from my marriage came back to me, but it's so small now. It's small moments that make me tear up for just a minute, but then it passes. I still have emotional flashbacks. That's something to look into. As the years go on, they get less and less, but I do still have them.
Yeah. And you're still healing.
Yeah. It's ongoing. It can take the rest of our lives, but it just dissipates over time. It gets easier, and the crying isn't, all day long anymore.
Yeah.
Like I said, I might just get choked up a little bit and no tears actually come out, but I'm still feeling it and releasing it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for saying that too. So that way, I think that's such an important point, is that the healing is going to continue, and it will continue to shift and look different, and it's okay to be triggered.
Yeah.
That you're going through it.
Yeah. Triggers are good. I see it now as kind of like it's a shovel, somebody handing me a shovel to say, hey, there's something you need to dig up and look at it. And then I dig it up, I look at it, I deal with it, and it's gone.
Yeah. Well, thank you so, so much for coming back on here and joining me, and also for the work that you do. Anytime I have a client that comes to me that is like, and I notice that it's a part, even in like our very early time together, I always send them to your Instagram or TikTok and I tell them just to start, but
I appreciate that. And I've seen a lot of referrals, actually. I meant to mention it. I've seen a lot of people come from your Substack.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, I have plugged you a few times because like I said, like this was a topic that, so maybe I think I understood the coercion part. I wasn't understanding the connection all the time. But then once I did, it was like this light bulb moment. And I have conversations with people all the time about like, it's not okay, or like here, I'll say, I think you need to go and look through some of this content and then let's just have a conversation about it. Just tell me what is coming up for you. But people have said it's very validating to hear anybody talking about it, but also talking about it as bluntly as you do.
Yeah. Oh, I am blunt.
Me too. And that's why I think they like you, because that's why they like me.
I don't want to waste time mincing words and sugarcoating.
No. Well, like I said, thank you. And I hope we could do this again,
I always enjoy it.
And if you could just close out and tell us where we can find you.
Okay. Yeah. You can find me at alwaysmending.com and at TikTok, always mending, and Instagram, always.mending.
Yeah. And if you think that she blocked you, she might not have.
Yes.
Yeah, just a new account. Yeah.
Oh, yes. If you were following mending.me, either on TikTok or Instagram, I'm very sorry if you've not been able to find me and it looks like you're blocked. That is not the case. Both of those accounts are gone.
Yeah.
On Threads also. In fact, Threads is where I will often post raw thoughts before they become a post or a video.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, again, thank you so, so much. And I really hope that we can do this again soon.
Yeah, me too. Thanks.
All right. Bye.
Bye.